The Siege of Algeciras was undertaken during the Reconquest of Spain by the Castillian forces of Alfonso XI, assisted by the fleets of the Kingdom of Aragon and the Republic of Genoa. The objective was to capture the Muslim city of Al-Jazeera Al-Khadra, called Algeciras by Christians. The city was the capital and the main port of the European territory of the Marinid Empire. The siege lasted for 21 months. The population of the city, about 30,000 people including civilians and Berber soldiers, suffered from a land and sea blockade that prevented the entry of food into the city. The Emirate of Granada sent an army to relieve the city, but it was defeated beside the Rio Parmones. Following this, on the 26th of March 1344, the city surrendered and was incorporated into the Kingdom of Castile. This was one of the first military engagements in Europe where gunpowder was used. Background: Moorish threat to Castile. Algeciras was formerly part of the Emirate of Granada. In 1329 the city was taken over by the King of Morocco, who made it the capital of his European domains. Forces from Granada and Morocco recovered the nearby city of Gibraltar in 1333. In 1338 Abd al-Malik, son of the King of Morocco and ruler of Algeciras and Ronda, launched raids against the Castillian territories in the south of the Iberian Peninsula. In one of these he was killed by Castillian soldiers. His body was taken back to Algeciras, where it was buried. Abd al-Malik's father Abu al-Hasan Ali ibn Othman crossed the strait in 1340, defeated a Spanish fleet and landed in the city. On the grave of his son he swore to defeat the Castillian king. He first went to the town of Tarifa, to which he laid siege. King Alfonso XI of Castile, overwhelmed by the incursions of the new North African force and the possibility of losing the city of Tarifa, gathered an army with the help of King Alfonso IV of Portugal. The two armies, Castilian Portuguese and Moroccan Granadan, clashed near Taris Las Lances Beach in the Battle of Rio Salado. The defeat of the Muslims in this battle encouraged Alfonso XI and convinced him of the need to take the city of Algeciras, since it was the main port of entry of troops from Africa. Preparation starting in 1341, Alfonso XI began to prepare the necessary troops to lay siege to the city. He ordered construction of several ships and secured the services of the Genoese fleet of Egidio Boccanegra and squadrons from Portugal and Aragon. On land, besides his Castilian troops and troops from Aragon, there were many European crusaders and was supported by the kings of England and France. The campaign was financed by extending the alcabala tax on bread, wine, fish and clothing to include sales of all goods. The courts of Burgos, Leon, Avila and Zamora were called in 1342 to approve the new tax. Alfonso XI met with the Portuguese Admiral Carlos Pesana in El Puerto de Santa Maria and heard from Pero de Montada, admiral of the Aragon squadron, that it was heading for Algeciras. He then left for Guedes Cove, just 3 kilometers from the city, to check the status of the galleys at his disposal. On his arrival at Guedes, Pero de Montada informed the king that he had intercepted several ships carrying food to the city, and that the galleys of Portugal and Genoa had engaged 80 Moorish galleys in combat, captured 26 of them and forced the others to take refuge in African ports. According to the Castillian knights, this was the time to encircle the city, since it should have limited supplies. The king, however, felt he still had too few troops in place. Most of his forces were in Jerez de la Frontera awaiting his orders, while the troops defending Algeciras had already been warned of their arrival. The king returned to Jerez, assembled his council and informed them of the state of the city. He sent orders to the admirals at Geddes to intercept any boats trying to supply the city and to try to capture some Al-Jazeera who could inform them about the condition of the two towns. He also sent orders to his almogavars to do the same on land. The king's knights advised him about the best places to establish the main base where the king and nobles would live, and the vulnerable points where they could do most damage to the city's defenses. It was only needed to move troops to Algeciras, build bridges over the Barbate River and over a stream near Jerez, and send ships to the Wadlit River to carry food for the troops. On the 25th of July 1342, Alfonso XI left Jerez accompanied by his troops and the officials and knights who were to assist him in the Siege of Algeciras. These included the Archbishop of Toledo, the Bishop of Cádiz, the Master of Santiago, Juan Alonso Pérez de Guzmán y Coronel Pero Ponce de Leon, Joan Núñez, Master of Calatrava, Nuno Camiso, Master of Alcantara, Fray Alfonso Ortiz Calderón, Prior of San Juan, and the councils of Seville, Córdoba, Jerez, Jaézquén, Ecija, Carmona and Niebla. On the 1st of August, the Castillian troops and their allies arrived at Geddes, comprising a force of 1,600 mounted soldiers and 4,000 archers and lancers. The troops and squadrons of Aragon, Genoa and Castile took the positions. On the 3rd of August, the headquarters were established on a knoll to the north of Algeciras. The king lived in the tower there in the early months of the siege, surrounded by the knights and nobles who accompanied him. The Torre de los Adalides, named for the time, gave an excellent view of the Muslim city and of the roads that communicate with Gibraltar and eastern Andalusia. Algeciras Al-Jazeera Al-Khadra was the first city founded by Muslims when they arrived in the Iberian Peninsula in 711. In the 14th century, the city had two separate towns with their own walls and defenses. Between the two towns was the Rio de Limiel. The river mouth formed a wide inlet which acted as a natural harbor protected by the Isle Green Island, which the Muslims called Jazirat al-Hakim. The north town, Al-Medina, called Villa Vieja by the Spaniards, was the oldest of the two and was founded in 711. It was surrounded by a wall with towers and a deep moat protected by a barbican and a parapet. The entrance to the Villa Vieja from the Gibraltar Road was protected by a massive gateway called the Fonsario, near the main city cemetery. This entrance was the weakest point of the defensive works and therefore the best defended. The Southtown Albania, called Villa Nueva by the Spaniards, was built by the Marinids of Abu Yusuf Yaqub ibn Abd al-Haqq in 1285. It was on a plateau that he had once held the industrial neighborhood of Lulia, Traducta, the Roman Algeciras. The steepness of its perimeter helped its defense, so it was not necessary to build such strong defenses as those of the Villa Vieja. The Villa Nueva housed the fortress and the troops who had been established in the city. Algeciras had about 800 horsemen and 12,000 crossbowmen and archers, with a total population of 30,000 people, according to information from captives given to the King of Castile in the early days of the siege.